is that more than 435 tons of gold was smuggled out of Africa in 2022.
For 500 years, Western empires drained Africa's gold, leaving behind poverty, broken families, and poisoned rivers. But one African leader did the unthinkable. He arrested the CEOs of the world's richest mining giants. On the same day, at the same hour, billionaires who once flew in private jets now rot in prison cells, their stolen fortunes seized and returned to the people. How did Burkina Faso rise from victim to victor and dismantle a $500 billion empire? Now let us unveil the untold story. For centuries, Africa was forced to kneel, but that era was ending. At the heart of this unprecedented reckoning stood a single figure, Ibrahim Traoré, the unshakable leader of Burkina Faso. While the world watched in disbelief, the commanding heads of the planet's wealthiest mining syndicates were dragged from luxury suites into prison cells. Inside the very nation they once looted with absolute impunity. But their downfall was no accident. This was not the result of chance or coincidence. What unfolded was a strategic and methodical dismantling. The calculated takedown of a 50-year empire built on theft, deception, and financial colonization. It all began at 6 a.m. on March 15th in the capital city of Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. 7 mining company bosses, each lodged in luxury hotels, were apprehended simultaneously as elite tactical units executed precision arrests. Among those detained was Victor Petro, Chief Executive Officer of Gold Max Corporation, one of the world's dominant gold conglomerates operating across international commodity markets. Also captured were Jean-Claude Dubois, the head of Canadian Western Gold Mining, and Michael Thompson, a top executive at Australia's Pacific Resources. But this wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. Traoré had been maneuvering in silence, carefully, methodically, for months. He initiated sweeping financial audits of every extraction firm operating within Burkina Faso. Then, he recruited an international team of legal scholars, compliance attorneys, and global finance experts to build airtight legal cases against each corporation under violations of international trade law. The evidence that surfaced was staggering. Over 5 decades, the cumulative value of gold looted from Burkina Faso reached $500 billion. Yet only $10 billion ever made its way into the nation's public accounts. Evidence of a sophisticated system of capital flight designed to keep African nations financially paralyzed. For 6 months, Traoré's investigative network operated with complete discretion. They embedded trusted agents inside nearly every mining facility. Surveillance drones mapped extraction routes, while satellite monitoring technology offered indisputable data on real output levels. Every ounce of missing gold was meticulously documented through forensic data analytics. What they discovered was nothing short of economic warfare. Companies were officially reporting just 1/10 of their actual extraction volumes. A deliberate manipulation of financial disclosures. Traoré made his declaration with absolute clarity. Gold mined from our earth, by the sweat of our people, is stacking up in European vaults, while our citizens starve. This looting ends now. The ultimatum was unmistakable: either return what you've stolen, or face imprisonment. The arrests were swift. Victor Petro attempted to summon his personal security, but Burkina Faso's elite forces had neutralized all perimeters in advance. He was apprehended wearing pajamas and escorted directly to a maximum security facility. Western Gold Mining's Dubois had prepared an escape plan. A private jet stood fueled and waiting on the runway. But Traoré had already grounded all outbound flights and sealed the nation's borders. Dubois was intercepted mid-transit and detained immediately. Michael Thompson from Pacific Resources was discovered in a hotel conference room, in the middle of orchestrating an illegal asset relocation out of the country. His open laptop, filled with transaction data, became critical evidence in the legal proceedings. Traoré had left no gaps. He ordered every foreign extraction firm to surrender their financial records covering the past decade. His team of forensic accountants dissected the documents, layer by layer, over several months, The extent of deception was mind-blowing. Take Goldmax Corporation as one example. In 2019 alone, they extracted $500 million worth of gold from the Topa mine, but declared only $5 million for tax purposes. The concealment was executed by underreporting extraction volumes, removing 10 tons daily while officially reporting just 1 ton. The remaining 9 tons vanished into untraceable global financial pipelines. And yet, this was merely the opening act of a far more extensive economic confrontation. The deeper investigators dug, the darker the financial labyrinth became. Western Gold Mining had engineered its own sophisticated scheme of financial fraud. The firm generated falsified invoices, recording kilograms of gold, each valued at $60,000 on the global market, as having been sold for merely $10,000. The rest of the profits vanished into offshore private banking networks, far from Burkina Faso's reach. But Pacific Resources employed an even more insidious form of tax evasion. They inflated workers' wages as part of a corporate accounting loophole. Officially, miners appeared to be earning salaries nearly 10 times higher than reality. The company then wrote off these artificially bloated payroll expenses as tax deductions, securing unlawful profit margins while robbing the state of rightful revenue. Yet Traore was not deceived. He personally reviewed every ledger, scrutinized every contract, and meticulously authenticated them as formal legal exhibits. But some of the most damning discoveries weren't in the spreadsheets. They were hidden within clandestine contracts between foreign corporations and corrupted state officials, laying bare the entrenched network of corporate corruption. In 2015, Mark Carbo, who was then serving as energy minister, received $50 million in bribes from Goldmax Corporation. The payoff slashed the corporation's tax obligation from 30% to a meager 3%, bleeding Burkina Faso of $2 billion in public funds annually, obstructing both economic development and essential social services. Western Gold Mining went even further. In 2017, they wired $100 million in covert payments to Franny Oisius Cabaret, brother of then-President Roch-Marc Christian Cabaret. In exchange, they secured 3 new mining permits, granted over ancestral lands long inhabited by indigenous families, triggering mass displacements and irreversible harm to rural livelihoods. 50,000 people were violently uprooted from their homes and farmlands. Another echo of systemic extraction, one that resonates deeply with communities across the Black diaspora who've lived through forced removals and generational dispossession. Pause for a moment. If this was your family's land, how would justice be defined? Type Amen if you stand with Traore's bold resistance. Traore had reached his threshold. The evidence was compiled and submitted to the International Criminal Court under the banner of crimes against humanity, charging the firms with mass displacements, child labor abuses, and environmental devastation that stripped communities of both generational wealth and basic dignity. The tribunal accepted the charges, but Traore advanced even further. He froze all corporate accounts, seized physical properties, and nationalized every ounce of gold stockpiled inside the country. The reclaimed assets, valued at $100 billion, were returned to Burkina Faso's people, laying the foundation for a future rooted in sovereign wealth management. Global backlash came swiftly. Western media labeled Traore a despot. The European Union convened an emergency summit. The United States issued carefully worded diplomatic threats, reminiscent of past interventions that often followed when African nations asserted economic independence. But Traore remained unshaken. "We are upholding the law," he declared. "For 50 years, these corporations evaded taxes, looted our land, and exploited our people. Now the law speaks, and we will not surrender to Western pressure." The people responded with a unity not seen in decades. Hundreds of thousands flooded the streets of Ouagadougou, waving banners that read "Our gold is ours." In rural mining villages, families tasted hope for the first time in generations, a glimpse of post-colonial reform finally taking shape. Amadou Sodo, a 65-year-old miner, wept before journalists. I've worked these mines for more than 40 years. Europe built its fortune from the gold we dug out of this ground, but my own children still can't afford an education at last. At last, justice has arrived for people like me. Meanwhile, the imprisoned CEOs were now facing a reality they never imagined. Victor Petro, head of Gold Max, immediately launched a hunger strike. But Traoré's resolve was unmoved. "Our miners go to bed hungry every day," he stated firmly. "Perhaps it's time you experience their struggle firsthand." The Jean-Claude Dubas, the CEO of Western Gold, took a different approach, mobilizing his high-powered legal team in hopes of international intervention. The courtroom drama reached a level that even seasoned international observers had never witnessed. It began when Jean-Claude Dubois offered a staggering $1 billion in bail. But Traoré dismissed the offer with calm defiance. "What is $1 billion?" he asked, "compared to the $500 billion you already looted from us? Besides, let's not pretend. This so-called money belongs to us in the first place." Michael Thompson, desperate to avoid facing the tribunal, faked a heart attack. Collapsing in a prison corridor, he was rushed to a medical evaluation ordered personally by Traoré. The expert diagnosis was swift, no signs of any cardiac event. The theatrical stunt was entered into court records as yet another act of legal obstruction. An insult to the families awaiting justice. The list of accused executives grew longer. Robert Mackenzie of Continental Gold faced charges of violently displacing communities. James Harrison from African Minerals was indicted for deploying children as young as 10 into dangerous mining shafts. Peter Williams of Global Mining Corp was accused of catastrophic environmental violations. And David Anderson of Summit Resources stood accused of providing financial aid and resources to armed insurgent groups, escalating regional instability. A textbook example of foreign-backed destabilization. Then came the trial that riveted not only Africa, but the world. Traoré had constructed a tribunal that shattered decades of Western legal dominance. The court's bench was intentionally diverse, 3 African justices, 2 from Asia and 2 from Latin America, forming a true coalition of post-colonial legal sovereignty. There would be no Bretton Woods-style influence, no IMF legal proxies, no Western pressure. Only justice. As the trial opened, the chief prosecutor delivered the charges with surgical precision. Victor Petro of Gold Max Corporation faced 234 separate allegations, ranging from tax evasion and corruption to environmental destruction and forced displacement. Jean-Claude Dubois from Western Gold Mining faced 1889 criminal counts, including the sickening charge of child labor. The evidence was irrefutable: children, some as young as 12, trapped deep underground for 16-hour shifts. They inhaled toxic dust, robbed of sunlight and fresh air. Most did not survive beyond their 15th birthdays, victims of advanced pulmonary failure. Their lives reduced to commodities in the machinery of extractive capitalism. But it was Michael Thompson of Pacific Resources who faced the most haunting accusation of all. He had systematically poisoned 3 river systems by discharging cyanide waste. The contamination spread like a silent killer, resulting in a 10-fold increase in cancer diagnoses across 17 towns. Over 2,000 lives were lost, victims of environmental genocide masked as corporate efficiency. One by one, the survivors came forward, not as statistics, but as human witnesses to a horror long ignored. Musa Orgo, who entered the mines at age 8, now stood at 23 with a failing respiratory system. Tears welled in his eyes as he testified. "They stole my youth. They destroyed my lungs. My future. It's gone." Then came 70-year-old Mariam Cow. Her village had been bulldozed. Ancestral burial grounds desecrated for gold extraction. Draped in a simple shawl, her voice quivered as she recounted the betrayal. "Our forefathers are buried on that land. They annihilated everything. And what did they give us in return? $100. She paused, tears streaming. 100. While they stole billions. Through it all, Traoré never flinched. He sat openly in court, day after day, fully exposed to public scrutiny. projecting the exact kind of leadership transparency that had long eluded both African and global political systems. He stood shoulder to shoulder with his people, not hidden behind diplomatic walls, but fully present. Traore listened to every painful testimony. He looked each accused executive directly in the eye, embodying the very definition of moral leadership accountability. One morning, standing before a crowd of reporters outside the courthouse, he declared, "This isn't merely Burkina Faso's battle. It's Africa's battle. If we succeed, if we remain steadfast, then other nations will find courage too." And indeed, his defiant stand triggered a seismic shift across the African continent, a domino effect of sovereign defiance against corporate colonialism. In Mali, Assimi Goïta launched criminal probes into foreign mining behemoths. In Guinea, Mamadi Doumbouya initiated parallel investigations into illegal asset extraction. In Niger, Abdourahmane Tiani systematically revoked foreign mining licenses, dismantling decades of one-sided agreements crafted under the shadow of multinational corporate lobbying. Western mining companies went into financial free fall. Stock valuations crumbled overnight. Goldmax Corporation lost over 70% of its market capitalization, a staggering collapse for one of the largest players in the global commodities market. Western gold mining hovered on the brink of bankruptcy. Pacific Resources was forced to terminate all operations across Africa, signaling an existential crisis in the very architecture of foreign direct investment exploitation. The panic reached Europe's corridors of power. In Paris, emergency meetings were held behind closed doors. The French President Emmanuel Macron issued a sharp, unmistakable threat. "You will face consequences for this. You cannot interfere with our investors." Traore answered with brutal clarity, "You mean colonizers, not investors. We welcome legitimate investors, but we reject thieves dressed in business suits." Washington also entered the fray. US President Joe Biden warned of potential sanctions and threatened to pull foreign aid from Burkina Faso. Once again, Traore remained unfazed. His answer was a masterclass in financial sovereignty. "Which assistance?" he asked. "The $100 million you send annually. We will generate $10 billion every year from our own gold reserves. Keep your aid. Use it on your puppet regimes." Inside the courtroom, the storm of revelations intensified. Recovered internal emails from Goldmax Corporation exposed the raw, unfiltered contempt these executives held for African lives. In private exchanges, they referred to the people of Burkina Faso as stupid natives. One message sneered, "We can make them do anything for a few million in bribes. They dance for dollars." At Western Gold Mining, the correspondence was even more grotesque. Senior executives openly reduced underage miners to mere financial metrics. One email from CEO Dubois read, "Instead of paying $100 to a single adult, we pay $10 each to 10 kids, and they stay quiet." At Pacific Resources, confidential memos outlined precise instructions for dumping cyanide directly into vital water sources. One chilling note read, "Nobody will notice. These people don't live long anyway. Even if cancer kills them, they won't know who to blame." Continental Gold's Robert McKenzie dismissed the violent displacement of entire villages, a necessary sacrifice for development. African Minerals' James Harrison calculated worker fatalities as an acceptable trade-off for quarterly earnings. Global Mining Co. Milling Ops Peter Williams minimized environmental collapse with the cynical remark, "Nature always heals itself." Traore's hands trembled momentarily as he reviewed these vile confessions. But instead of rage, he chose something far more powerful: resolve. Calmly shutting the folder, he locked his gaze forward and delivered a statement that would echo across generations. "Do you now understand what they truly think of us? In their eyes, we are disposable, but their game, it ends here. Justice is coming." By the 6th month, the courtroom reached its verdict. Silence gripped the gallery, yet the air pulsed with historical weight. Every CEO stood convicted. Victor Petro of Goldmax received 50 years in prison, alongside a financial penalty of $10 billion. Jean-Claude Dubois of Western Gold Mining faced 45 years and an $8 billion fine. Michael Thompson of Pacific Resources was handed a life sentence, convicted for environmental atrocities that led to catastrophic water contamination, mass fatalities, and irreversible ecological system collapse. Robert Mackenzie of Continental Gold received 40 years for violently uprooting entire communities. James Harrison, who had systematically exploited children for hazardous labor, was sentenced to 55 years behind bars. Peter Williams received 60 years for orchestrating large-scale environmental destruction, responsible for the loss of countless innocent lives. David Anderson was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole after being found guilty of financing armed militant groups, fueling regional instability that threatened both domestic security and broader geopolitical stability. Then, the court delivered a verdict that stunned the international financial elite. All personal holdings of the convicted executives, luxury yachts, beachfront estates, private aircraft, offshore accounts, and priceless artwork, were ordered fully confiscated. But the most revolutionary aspect wasn't asset seizure itself. It was redistribution. The court mandated that all proceeds from these liquidations would be paid directly to the families of the victims, introducing an unprecedented form of reparative economic justice rarely seen in post-colonial Africa. After the historic ruling, Traore stepped down to the courthouse steps and addressed a world gripped by disbelief. His words echoed far beyond Burkina Faso. Today, we did not merely prosecute 7 individuals. We put 5 centuries of colonial oppression on trial. And today, we achieved victory. This is not just our triumph. It is Africa's collective resurrection. But Traore wasn't finished. His next move redefined resource nationalism for the modern era. With swift legislative action, the state nationalized every remaining foreign mining operation. Out of this sweeping transition emerged the Burkina Faso National Mining Company, a fully sovereign, state-owned enterprise engineered to manage the nation's mineral wealth exclusively for its people. 70% of all mineral revenues were earmarked directly for critical human development sectors: education, healthcare, and infrastructure. A direct investment into human capital development and generational wealth building. The results were astonishing and almost immediate. Modern hospitals and well-equipped schools rose across long-neglected regions. Miner wages skyrocketed tenfold, allowing families to escape cycles of generational poverty. Child labor was abolished entirely. Advanced safety technologies were installed to ensure every worker returned home safely. Daily fatalities, once commonplace, dropped to zero. The streets across Burkina Faso exploded with jubilation. Children sang his name. Elderly men raised their fists skyward in victory. Mothers and grandmothers shed tears as they danced in unison, chanting, "Traore brought our gold home. Traore is the people's man." Festivals blazed under the night skies, illuminating remote villages that for decades had known only abandonment and despair. For the first time, entire communities saw a future filled not with anxiety, but with sovereign possibility. Predictably, Western media unleashed a full-scale smear campaign. They labeled him a dictator, an autocrat, a threat to international order. But their narrative disintegrated in the face of indisputable metrics on the ground. Burkina Faso's economy was booming under this model of resource-driven economic independence. Unemployment plummeted. Poverty rates fell at unprecedented speed. In schools, hospitals, and infrastructure projects across the country, an invisible revolution of functional governance was unfolding. And the hard data dismantled every Western accusation. In just 12 months, national revenues surged by 300%. 500 new schools opened their doors. 200 hospitals began offering free public health care. Over 5,000 kilometers of new paved roads linked isolated communities. Electricity illuminated over 2,000 villages that had long remained in darkness. Clean, safe drinking water reached over 3 million citizens for the first time. For the once forgotten mine workers, this was nothing short of a resurrection. Minimum wages jumped from $50 to $500 per month. Each miner received full health insurance under a nationalized plan. Modern workplace safety protocols, aligned with international labor standards, became mandatory. Most telling of all, the number of fatal mining accidents fell to zero. But even as this economic miracle unfolded, Traoré's most ambitious transformation was still on the horizon. The revolution within education, specialized technical universities sprang up in every single mining region. For the first time in Burkina Faso's history, young people could stay within their own communities and receive world-class training as engineers, geologists, metallurgists, chemists, and mineral economists, all without ever leaving their homeland. Over 10,000 students were enrolled under full government-funded scholarships. An intentional investment in domestic intellectual capital that would secure sovereignty for generations to come. But this educational revolution did not stop at Burkina Faso's borders. It triggered a seismic ripple across Africa. In Mali, 5 senior mining executives were arrested. In Guinea, the entire bauxite sector was brought under state control. In Niger, uranium extraction was fully nationalized. The old colonial blueprint of extraction, without restitution, was crumbling under the weight of an awakened continent. A new current swept across Africa, one defined by resource sovereignty, economic independence, and moral clarity. Africa had begun its irreversible ascent. Before an ocean of citizens gathered in the capital, Traoré stood beneath the rising sun and addressed his people. The crowd waited in solemn anticipation. His voice rang out, "We are not enemies to anyone. Our doors remain open to every nation that seeks fair and honest trade." He paused, surveying the sea of hopeful faces. But the era of exploitation is over. Africa's resources belong to African people. It really is that simple. As the people rejoiced, the once mighty CEOs languished in their cells, stripped of power, wealth, and relevance. Their corporations, once pillars of global mining dominance, were disintegrating in slow motion. Gold Max Corporation collapsed entirely, unable to recover from its legal, financial, and reputational ruin. Western gold mining was quietly absorbed by an obscure holding entity for a fraction of its former valuation. Pacific Resources was fully liquidated, its remaining assets sold off to settle staggering debts. What had started as one leader's defiance had now crystallized into a living historical moment, one that shattered centuries of unchecked Western economic dominance. For the first time in modern geopolitical memory, an African head of state had faced down the entire architecture of neocolonial extraction and prevailed. From that moment forward, the global power calculus could never return to its old balance. The people of Burkina Faso were no longer spectators in history. They had become its authors. Their gold no longer sailed across oceans into hidden European vaults. It now financed classrooms, clinics, modern highways, clean energy projects, and cutting-edge laboratories within their own villages. Children who once labored under collapsing mine shafts now read books, chased footballs, and dreamed of futures once denied to them. Miners who once survived on starvation wages now earned salaries that built homes, educated children, and restored dignity to families once trapped in generational poverty. But Traoré's movement refused to be confined by national borders. Its spirit radiated outward, to Latin America, to South Asia, to every forgotten corner where global injustice had once reigned uncontested. New movements ignited, forgotten voices grew powerful. Flags waved in resistance. Across multiple continents, disenfranchised people reclaimed their narratives. And in every rising chant, Traoré's words echoed louder: justice always finds its way, sometimes late, sometimes fierce, but it comes. The decaying architecture of the old world order, founded on plunder and silence, was now in terminal decline. Africa had risen, and this time, no foreign profiteer would steal its treasures again. Because its people were awakened. Because leaders like Traoré stood unflinching as guardians of sovereignty. Because history itself had shifted. But this is not the end of the story. Traoré's mission continues. Each morning, he rises and takes one more step. toward deeper sovereignty, toward absolute dignity, toward an Africa fully liberated and truly self-determined. And soon, all of Africa's treasures, once locked inside parasitic foreign contracts, will return home as the rightful inheritance of African children. That day approaches, because Traore paved the path, and now, the people are walking it. Has this story moved you? If it has, we invite you to share your reflections in the comments. If you believe in justice, dignity, and the unstoppable rise of Africa, support this mission by liking the video, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel so you can stand with us for every chapter of this unfolding revolution. We'll see you in the next chapter, where truth keeps rising. May the Most High bless and protect Africa, a continent of resilience, rebirth, and unshakable destiny.